That's it. What do we got there? Jupiter. Jupiter. We're going to talk about Jupiter. This is the May full moon. When a full moon occurs, it represents the end of a cycle. Jupiter is the ruler of this full moon. So I want you to start listing all the Jupiter keywords. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Spirituality, religious beliefs, the word belief, the word truth, and wisdom. What about judges and the judicial system? Supreme Court, justices, right? Judgments, literally, judgments. How about truth? I think I said that twice now. But what about the search for truth? Like, I gotta search. I gotta seek it out. Seeking and searching, traveling, going on a journey. This is all Jupiter stuff. I gotta take this journey. Sometimes we might take an airplane to go on that journey because it's Jupiter. So it's over by the sea, right? I gotta fly over the sea. Or if I'm in my car driving, it's like I'm driving coast to coast, right? Across the continent. I'm traveling far and away. Foreigners, foreign lands, foreign languages even. So we think of immigration, like that's all Jupiter stuff. Jupiter energy. Wisdom. Wisdom is a big word. What about the future? Having an understanding and seeing into the future. Some call Sagittarius Jupiter sage energy. They say, oh, that's sage advice, right? Jupiter can be somebody who is in charge, like an authority figure, and Jupiter is also normally considered beneficial. It's usually a beneficial energy. So I started talking about this as a full moon. So add some keywords in: traveling, vacation, the ability to seek and truth. But what about the word freedom? My belief about freedom, right? I was mentioning like philosophy and life, and your idea and your definition of freedom and my idea and definition of freedom may not match when we start really diving into that word and the understanding, especially when we combine it with the judicial system and equality and justice for all. That's been a big thing, a big running theme, right? For a long time, but it seems like it's super prevalent, especially here in the States. I know I must say that at least 5 times a video in every video, but it definitely seems like we have what they call a two-tier justice system, right? Like it's these rules, are for you, but not for me type of thing. These rules are for the public, but I'm not part of the public. Like those who, the haves and the have-nots, have supposedly the same rules, but yet different rules. So equality and justice is supposed to be, well, I should say it like this: are they the same thing? We think of Jupiter as being wise because it has the experience. It's got like this world traveler experience. It's not always recognized as someone who's like a senior, someone who's older. When we say authority figure, like a Saturn Capricorn energy, right? Someone who's up there, who's got that age experience. But in this sign, often I think that quote from Indiana Jones, where it's not necessarily it's more about the mileage. It's not the vehicle or not the age, but it's more about the mileage. I think that's what he said. I don't know. I think I'm combining 2 quotes, but the point is it's about the experiences. Because you can be old as dirt, but if you haven't had access to other civilizations and cultures, if you haven't been around people who didn't have the same beliefs as you, if you didn't get exposed to different religions, different ethnicities, even different food and cultures, right? If you didn't have that kind of exposure and embrace it for the sake of learning, Jupiter, higher knowledge. How do we get to the wisdom part, right? We got to be willing to go on that journey. We got to be willing to experience. We got to be willing to seek. We got to be willing to consider options and choices, freedom and truth, and that my truth might not be your truth. And my idea of freedom and definition of it might not be the same as yours. So, Jupiter energy can be also known as confident, very confident energy, very confident. And because of that confidence, it can sometimes, it might get itself in trouble because it's overly confident. It tends to exaggerate and it can go overboard at times. Where Jupiter comes, it's going to expand upon something and it should just be all beautiful, wonderful, and yay. But here's the thing about Jupiter, because it's energy traveling through the human, it can exaggerate on anything. So if you've got Jupiter set up in a way in your chart where it can touch something that may not be really great for you, and I'll give you an example. One of my housemates, in their natal chart, their Chiron, the wound, right? Their wounds, their most wounds that you have, the wounds from the past, the intense wounds from the past, the deep buried wounds from the past, they have that in Pisces. Their Chiron is in Pisces. They also have their Jupiter in Pisces, right? Now, their natal Jupiter and their natal Chiron are conjunct. So this person goes through a cycle where when they get ill, they get pretty damn ill because it's Jupiter. So in Chiron and when the wounds and when the sickness, when it gets worn down, right? Then like it happens, it really happens. And it's not every single solitary time because I've seen, I've witnessed, I've watched where, okay, this person had COVID. Yeah, they got the meds, but no way in hell did they didn't have to go into the hospital. Like they made it through, right? Yes, they were vaccinated, and this isn't a conversation about that. But the point is, they took all the precautions to stay safe because they were prone to pneumonia because of the expansiveness of the water, the overabundance of water in their chart, and respiratory issues, right? Water. Pisces is water. Jupiter in Pisces, an abundance of water. So I kind of gave you an example of how, sure, there are times when Jupiter can be wonderful. And yes, Jupiter is this person's greater benefic in their chart, by the way. The point is, Jupiter can expand on whatever it touches. You see? So it doesn't always have to be just the most wonderful, beautiful, fabulous stuff. Because typically, if you were to just like do a quick Google search, luck, fortune, success, generosity, right? It's the force of good in the universe. Like these are some typical things you're going to read about Jupiter. Characteristics for Jupiter. Oh, publishing, by the way, publishing. So if you have a book or a YouTube channel, you're going to press publish or publish something, publishing, right? Higher education and teaching on that higher level, college level. But it's the luck, it's authority, and it's in general, it represents an abundance of something, an abundance of something. It's not real fond of details, though. Some even refer to it as the embodiment of Lady Luck. Like I'm literally reading this. Ideology, spiritual, faith, religion, philosophy, the search for the ultimate truth of life. Jupiter, known as the Sky Father, as the god of the sky and thunder, often depicted holding a thunderbolt. I've never heard this before. Interesting. Jupiter is derived from the roots, meaning Sky Father, making him the ideal namesake for the gas giant that is our biggest and oldest planetary neighbor. Adventurous, expansive, and optimistic. Very true. Oh, another one, happy relationships, luck, wealth, vast spirituality, and practical knowledge, right? I think of Jupiter energy and I think of how it can be just different and show up differently in our lives. So it depends, right? If we're having a full moon in Jupiter, find out where your natal Jupiter is in your chart. And so let's take a look real quick so that we can see what you see the symbol on the screen, right? And let's take a look at the symbol of Jupiter. It's kind of like that fancy four. Mm-hmm. Jupiter rules the sign of Sagittarius. It is also the ancient ruler of Pisces. All right. So the full moon happens at 2 degrees and 55 minutes. And when? May 23rd, 2024. There it is. Now, there is a video for the May 22nd, the week of May 22nd. I realized after, because I had to do, anyway, I had to call my mom right away. And I realized I wrote down on the chart when the full moon was. I didn't make a mention to it at all. But here is the video that I'll make sure I link below. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll vice versa. I'll link that video below because it explains the events before this full moon and the events following the full moon. This video is about just the full moon in Sagittarius at 2 degrees and 55 minutes. When a full moon occurs, it represents the end of a cycle. That's typically the basic meaning for the full moon. Okay? When you have a full moon, it means that the sun is at the opposite end of the moon. If we have the moon sitting here at 2 degrees and 55 minutes, then that means we should find, if we know our astrology, we know that Gemini is at the opposite of Sagittarius energy. And this is important, understanding both ends of energy, because Gemini is connected to Saggy. Saggy's connected to Gemini. Taurus is connected to Scorpio. Virgo's connected to Pisces. You see? Libra's connected to Aries. Cancer's connected to Capricorn. That's the zodiac. That's the way it works. Those are the polar opposites. And in this chart, see all the red in the center of the chart? See all that red? See all those red lines running up and down? See how all the red lines here? Yeah, there's quite a few of them. Means there's lots of objects at the same degrees because their line is being drawn vertically up and down every time to show you the opposition, to show you what an opposition looks like. And a symbol for the word opposition looks like that. That's what we call an opposition. And you can understand why, right? You can understand it because I'm going to take this energy down here in Saggy, and it's at the opposite end of the Gemini energy. So we got something down at one end, something down at the other end. And when it's the sun and the moon that make up that opposition, as opposed to the moon being on one end and Mars at the other, every single time the sun and the moon are at opposite ends by exact degree, that's a full moon because they just have to align. They have to, that alignment has to come. So we think to ourselves, well, geez, that must happen often. And you're right. It happens once a month. Sometimes it happens twice a month. Not normally, but sometimes. So there's the sun at 2 degrees and 55 minutes. Now remember, this is a cycle that's going to be closing out and ending. And the focus is on the Sagittarius. So we think of all of the Jupiter keywords that I mentioned. Remember the Jupiter keywords? There's a lot of them. Some sort of a cycle is ending. Something within the judicial system, justices, some sort of a ruling and coming to a closure, like, okay, Supreme Court finally went ahead and released their opinion or their final ruling on something. That would make sense for this, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would make sense. To me, it says it's a big deal, whatever this is. Could be a very big deal because Jupiter can be considered an authority figure. And Jupiter also being the ruler of Pisces, this is likely a public figure, not just an authority figure, but a public figure. And it can be a public figure. And when I say the end of a cycle and a ruling, yeah, again, I don't want to mention the United States politics. I feel like I do that every video. It just is a great example of the current energies. But we think of people who are in power or who were in power, whether they were in the government currently or in the past. But these can be people who are politicians, right? So political figures. But Jupiter being the ancient ruler of Pisces can also represent people who are in the spotlight in some way. Performers, right? So we think of musicians and artists, actors and actresses, Yeah. But these can also be like heads of state, foreigners, foreign lands, foreign language, foreign countries. Can be some what's happening on in that country over there. Okay. It's really kind of fascinating to me too, because Pisces energy, yes, we're still talking about the full moon, but because Jupiter is the thing, it's the planet that rules, we have to kind of look at all of the locations that Jupiter has its spoon in the pot. Think of the different pots on the stove, right? Think of all these different signs, all these 12 houses. Think of those on the stove as 12 different pots. Like you got a big, big kitchen stove, like a big commercial kitchen stove, and you got like two of those big things together. So there's enough to have 12 different pots on 12 different burners. So kind of think about each of these like that. Well, Jupiter is one of those chefs in the kitchen that's in charge of Pisces and Saggy. You see, Jupiter has something to say in two signs in astrology, not just one sign. At between like 0 and we'll say 5 degrees, because this is a full moon at 2 degrees and 55 minutes. Okay. Now, because of the matching degrees and the energy, there can be something with the jobs reports and the economy, because Regulus and part of fortune, like there's quite a few things down here in Virgo. So it creates a big cross in the chart, technically. Look how much stuff there is. Look at the stellium in Gemini. You see that? Sedna, the sun, and a couple of other asteroids, like 3 other asteroids are here, and these at 0 degrees even. So a 2-degree orb before, a 2-degree orb after, which is how we get an orb between 0 and 5 degrees for the full moon. So that would be in Sagittarius and maybe in Gemini for you. Okay? The opposition, right? 0 to 5 degrees. But it would be a temporary stress to Pisces if somebody has something in Pisces between 0 and 5, and Virgo between 0 and 5. You see? You understand why? Because it's a square. They're 90 degrees away from each other. And so then that creates what we call a T-square. That looks like either, yeah, you see it? Now, because we got so much in Gemini, we got to connect the dots all the way through. We got stuff here. And we got stuff here. Regulus is at 0 degrees in Virgo. We got all these asteroids, including Sedna at 0, and then the sun itself sitting at 2 degrees. So this is another great cross in this chart, and this is a mutable great cross, by the way. Normally, you guys have been hearing me talking about the great crosses that have been going on, which, by the way, they're still here. We still have the cardinal great cross, but this great cross added to that one is now a mutable great cross. A mutable great cross. Okay. So this full moon, I don't expect it to be this whole week, by the way, is powerful. Let's be clear. This whole week is powerful. And the week of May 22nd video is the one you're going to want to watch to hear like the ongoings of all the other stuff I'm showing you in this chart. But technically, feminine energy, because it's the moon. Okay. It can be a mixture of feminine and masculine energy because we're talking Jupiter. Now, the airlines and traveling and vacations can be a part of this, but it's an ending. So whether it's the court cases and the Supreme Court or the judicial system or freedoms of some sort being ruled upon, right? But because it's the moon, it represents the ending of a cycle, and it's family, it's homes, it's feelings, it's emotions. It can be the public. Yeah, it can be all of that. That the additional information I would add to this is values are going to be big on this, and likely values that have to do with women and women's rights and women's freedoms. It's probably somewhere in this mixture. To be sure, because there's so much in Gemini, there will be so much news at this time. Not specifically, of course, about the full moon, but this entire week. Sedna is strong this week. The sun, a couple of days before, was touching Sedna. And again, you want to know more about that, go to the other video. But what do you see on this at this time with this full moon specifically? You see that? You see Venus and Jupiter. It's in Taurus. Money, banking, central banking, finances, stock market, but more specifically, the interest rates and the banks and the Fed. Big deal here. It's Venus conjunct Jupiter. Remember I said at the beginning, Jupiter rules this full moon. So this is an end likely to the rate hikes. It's probably a confirmation that that is done and over with because it's an authority figure, Jupiter, an authority figure of the money, right? So that's going to be part of this. And then Venus is right next to it. Venus is what I value, my values, my bank account. But it's also the earth. It's your creature comforts. So we think of our clothing, the candles, the smells, the taste, the touch. Think of your five senses. Beauty. Beauty. Don't forget the planet, folks, and the earth herself. And the combination and the information, Gemini, the information of how a healthy planet is actually way more economical. And so as soon as big business gets on board with that, I'm not saying it's going to happen right at this moment, but I think that's where the cycles, not just this particular one, but all the cycles that I'm seeing point to that, where corporations, and this would be, right? Because we're talking about Jupiter and Venus at 29 degrees. These are like extreme degrees, first of all. They're extreme degrees. And they are authority figure degrees. They're big boss energy degrees. Corporations, the boss of the money even. Again, the Fed and the interest rates for the United States. A release and an ending of a cycle. So to find out for more in your chart and to figure out how this will affect you in your life, you're looking for where is the 2 degrees of Sagittarius. Find Sagittarius energy. It's going to look like this. It's the arrow. Yep, that's the arrow. That's Saggy. And then you go find 255, 2 degrees and 55 minutes. And because I gave it a big orb, because there's so many objects, because this isn't the only chart. I've looked at the asteroid chart too. There's objects, right? There's multiple objects. So I'm giving this an orb between 0 and 5 degrees. So it's a closure and an ending of some sort of a cycle. And it could be something as simple as a belief, like a belief that you have, a belief in your life.